My people, this will be a lot today, but it will only scratch the surface of all I have and all we that had the experience should tell you. I will explain from my perspective, but as I said, because I was there in that time to experience. PJ Patterson is the father of Jamaican Dan culture and state corruption. Mhm. I look at his tenure as a Jamaican politician and I believe that PJ's wickedness upon us was deliberate. It was always deliberate. I will explain why. Don't tell me that an educated person could be so ignorant that he made the decisions like PJ did without being deliberate. Speaking from my experience, I will tell you what I think. They always thought Jamaica was going in the wrong direction and that they could steer us against our will in the way that backra massa recommended to them with grand promises to them. I believe PJ Patterson is desperate to succeed and fulfill the wishes of backra massa that came to him through Norman Manley and then Michael Manley. All right. Hey everyone, it's Skywalker with the early morning coffee again, of course. I invite you to smell it for its good. It's good to be old enough to use experience to see the bigger picture. I was there to see what happened before many of you were born. Michael Manley was the grandfather, but PJ Patterson took on to his political father's habit too well. In his own words, he would do whatever it took to make sure that the JLP, the real enterprising party that always possessed the know how to grow an economy, did not ever get in office. We always had a case of the PNP wrecking the country and the JLP having to fix it, while the PNP used lies and propaganda to brainwash and pretend as if they did well, and sometimes so many people believe them. At least you see how they operate on the lies and propaganda part. You would not have to be there back in the days to experience it because you're experiencing that now. It's their deliberate strategy from the days of Michael Manley, and that's one thing about the PNP's approach that will not change. The only time this propaganda politics can change is when they have something to campaign on, and that will never happen. That will never happen because their purpose is not to prosper Jamaica at this time. PJ deliberately sold out much of our resources to Trinis. I believe that in his mind it did not matter because Jamaica should not be a separate independent state. In other words, he felt like it should be one Caribbean anyway, but that's not what our people wanted. No, it's not what we wanted. We already said no to federation, and so did the Caribbean people. The JLP has always had sound leaders, even exporting the know how, like Edward Siaga, whose wisdom helped to turn Singapore into a world power. But look at Jamaica. Michael Manley and PJ Patterson put spokes in his wheels and sabotage him. PJ will not do the same thing to Andrew Holness at a time when Edward Siaga's Singapore visions are being carried out in our Prime Minister. We will not just sit and play dumb anymore. Observe PJ's years in politics, and you will see that everything he did for Jamaica only amounted to sabotage, deliberate sabotage. Why would not PJ want Jamaica to prosper? You will soon understand. Intrinsically, Jamaicans are proud people who love their independence, just like most islands of the Caribbean. PJ Patterson will never be anything but a traitor to his people because that is what will serve his purpose. Had it not been for the tough resistance by the JLP from Bustamante, Shearer, Edward Ziaga, and now to Andrew Holness, we would already be sold to the CCJ and a shady concoction between PJ Patterson and his shady friends or handlers. We don't know exactly what that is, whatever is going on. What we know though is that Mark Golding, his puppet, is working hard to bow the constitutional reform process to the will of this PJ Patterson. But again, the JLP leader, Andrew Holness, is resisting for the will of the people to be respected. Mark Golding's gridlock and constitutional reform is in line with the same foolishness that has been going on for decades under Percival James Patterson, who believes he is a dictator ruling over this country as if the people's will is his birthright. He will not live to see what he wants to see. The people's will is not his birthright. PJ Patterson put a spoke in the wheel of every positive movement by every gifted leader in the history of Jamaica within his time in politics. The more Jamaica is growing or is stabilizing, the more it will prove that we can rule our own destiny. That will destroy PJ Patterson's plan or purpose. It is better for him when Jamaica is poor and desperate, and when being a one Caribbean state could be presented as a more feasible means of survival for us, or as a saving grace. Let's put it that way. It's amazing to see PJ now appearing from the invisible realm to attack Andrew Holness for nothing but the fact that Andrew Holness does too well for the PNP's comfort. What else could you be attacking Andrew Holness for except that he does too well? And the PNP has been given a purpose to bind Jamaica to the Caribbean and take away its sovereignty. PJ's puppet, Mark Golding, and the chain gang do not seem to be getting satisfactory results. And that's why this pirate serpent is crawling out from the woodwork again, talking about he was in no Dalgan pavilion. People, you will not believe the devices, the evil and godly ones that PJ adopted from Michael Manley and improved on. And there are so many I can only talk about a few. It would take the whole time. They would stop at nothing to systemically hold on to power in Jamaica. Michael Manley started the housing trust concept and used it to infiltrate areas where there were strong JLP presence. So the housing trust concept was started and used for something sinister. And now, at least, Andrew Holness is putting it to good use, right? Like in my area, where Manley built hundreds of houses, only to allow PNP activists and no others to purchase them. No JLP activist, no JLP person was allowed to buy one of these houses. So housing scheme in my area was almost totally PNP. Any JLP person would be one that pulled off some kind of trick to disguise their identity. Nairi reform in Hanover was used as a settlement for political activists, mostly ex-convicts, so that eventually they could be enforcers to keep him in power in the region. He came up with some hogwash explanation for why he's building a community of ex-convicts. In the East, there was a movement to create garrisons by violently removing JLP supporters from their areas and giving their homes to PNP settlers. This was so much of a horror that I won't get into it right now. At the end of it all, they had numerous garrison communities that ensured they received the head start even before elections were called. So, apart from the garrisons in Kingston, you will now get to learn that some of the housing schemes were built to become garrisons. Michael Manley sent activists to train in Cuba, and then they became his enforcers, and then it evolved into a gunman culture that soon became the Dan culture, and I will explain how it kept them in power as we go on. But this strongman gunman culture became prestigious. Okay, okay. So being a gunman was celebrated because you were serving a proper political purpose as far as you know. People, what I am telling you is not something I have to read in a book. It's not something that anyone can even tell me it was not so. We were all there. We saw it. It is simply by being honest enough and old enough to remember. I don't know if PJ adapted this by any means necessary concept from Michael Manley, but I know he worked it well and to the detriment of Jamaica. This celebration of gunman and stuff like that didn't begin in the dance hall. Michael Manley destroyed our country in order to have his own way, and so does PJ, and he still has not had his own way. What do you think he is here to do now? Huh? Why do you think PJ is back? Why do you think that a PNP party with men who are just as educated as the JLP, and even more so sometimes, who spent the most time in government, did little to move Jamaica forward, but a lot to keep it back? Is it because they wanted Jamaica to grow? Do you put the spoke in the wheel because you want it to go fast? If you don't believe me, go back and look at some of their decisions, including the lead up to FinTech and the way FinTech was initiated, and you will begin to see deliberate acts of sabotage, including the gang and gunman culture. In fact, study PJ's political lifetime and see if what he did was consisting of a lot of acts of sabotage. Just go back and see, right? Deliberate actions of sabotage, I said. If it were not so, he would be a political dunce then, or an uneducated person, and we know he went to good school, right? We know that PJ was my people. By the time the gang culture became a thing, group leaders became area rulers, and subsequently, the Dan culture began. The area rulers were enforcers that used intimidation to make sure everyone in the communities spoke that same language. Vote PNP. These gangsters were pampered because they kept the community in check. The thing about it, though, is that they needed incentives, and that's one of the reasons why the pork barrel came into being. They gave them parish council work, etc. But you know that bad man a bad man and bad man nah go work. These men got paid, but it was not pay to actually do parish council work. Sometimes their name was just registered that way, and they sat around and then they collected something saying they did work. They got paid because they were government enforcers. So then it was because they were enforcers. So having a gun, being a gunman, was a glorious thing. Soon they were given contracts, and where they were not given work, they became disgruntled. They brought badness to the work sites and demanded pay. Because they were important to the party, they would turn a blind eye, sort of, and allow the contractors to fork out their own money and pay these enforcers for nothing, or for these enforcers allowing them to work without problems, which was basically stealing. Extortion rackets evolved over time, so that now some of these gunmen became independent, and they also became independent dons, not needing politics anymore. However, they they could pay these people, they pay them. However, however, wherever they could find in the public pocket, or wherever space they could find in the public pocket to jar money, they would find it and pay these gangs until the gangsters grew by themselves. They got big, they got independent, they could pay their own way. They didn't need politicians to find them to corrupt cops. They went with their money. This created a pork barrel condition where monies were used in a corrupted way, right? Starting from that, corruption went sky high, it skyrocketed, right? Nothing was done by the municipalities, but it was okay because gangs and dons kept them in power. Even to this day, the gangs and dons themselves are very active during the elections. The leaders had nothing to do, they just left the work of making the people vote one way to the dance, and then they did nothing in their constituencies, right? Sometimes the dance provided even their own vehicles to help to pick up voters. They were, in fact, the best influencers that the PNP felt they needed. At one stage, either in the early 2000s or late 90s, they were claiming that they had nothing to do with criminals because crime was skyrocketing so much and they were being blamed for it. And they tried to distance themselves as much as possible because the gangs were independent now. It was only to give a good image to themselves. And at one time, they even attempted to make it seem like the politicians were not responsible for all that is happening now, this shutting down of Jamaica by gangs. Portia's words, "Me nah hug up no gunman," became famous, even when the people in her constituency were lamenting that she only cared for the gangsters. I think they had a gang that they called Ratbat or something like that. And that's what I heard the people talking about. And when she came, right, they said she didn't even visit their part of the community. Fast forward to today, and it becomes intrinsic to the PNP to the point that they don't even try to hide their gang culture anymore, right? You know all their gangs, you know who they are paying, you see them on their platforms, you see them everywhere, and you hear even the names of the member who is getting paid nowadays, right? If it is not blatant or conspicuous, you tell me. And because this unruliness has gotten away like a runaway train, everything that belongs to the public has to be served to enforcers instead, from parish council funds to zinc that came from foreign for the poor. It did not start under Mark Golding. Yes, Mark Golding is a part of it now, but it's a tradition. Omar Davis, their Minister of Finance, always claimed that they had no money, although people were being taxed more than today, a lot more than today. I mean, you start going to school at first farm, and by third farm, your school fee quadrupled, right? And you were taxed from every angle, right? Whenever the JLP is in power, they can find the money, right? You notice that? But the PNP never have the money, even though they are always taking more tax. Why? Why? Yeah? Why do you think it happened that way? Anybody? It's simple. Don't you see it yet? It's because they don't have to take out the pork barrel to serve to their enforcers. The JLP does not have to take out a pork barrel for any enforcers. They use parish council funds to do parish council work and state. taxes to do works of the state. And if you want to contradict me, tell me then, how do the JLP find money but the PNP can never find money, even when they can collect more? You explain that. The, mm, the public money is for the PNP devices, and for the JLP, the public money are public funds. That's where the difference lies. The JLP will find more money to spend while collecting a lot less taxes in value. Isn't that obvious yet? If the PNP wants think about a project, they have to think about we gonna need more money for that. No matter how much money is there, because they know the money can never be enough to fund all what they need to fund outside of what has to do with the public, with taxpayer. My people, I am just a bit surprised to see PJ pop up his head, for it makes me realize how stupid he thinks we all are, or like we can't figure him out. Listen, Michael Manley was the king of propaganda until PJ adopted the concept. Michael Manley was the birther of enforcers in politics until PJ brought it to a new and horrible level. Michael Manley used corruption to maintain power until PJ came and improved on this strategy, although it was Manley who entrenched much of what now benefits the PNP, like housing schemes that they put PNP members in and the garrisons they formed. I saw this firsthand. Manley even framed and locked up JLP members during election time for political clout. I am serious. He used corrupted members of the police force to protect his strongmen, favor for favor, and then, in turn, they kept him in power. Then the security force got more and more corrupt. Corrupt supervisors decided who they would arrest or not and what areas to attack or not, and they knew when to turn a blind eye. Until this day, you find many of these cops in retirement gravitating to the PNP to earn their lifetime rewards. Tivoli, being a garrison which they claimed was initiated by Edward Siaga, this was not all true either. Tivoli was created because people were displaced by PNP activists, and Portia Simpson can explain this too. They were consistently attacked and targeted and had to learn to be tough and defend themselves. As MP, Siaga poured much support into his downtrodden constituency, which became the garrison it had to evolve into. Years later, the PNP developed a strategy of using corrupt security officers to attack that one PNP garrison every time elections were called. And then they used propaganda to present it as JLP corruption, and like it was the only garrison in Jamaica. However, because of PNP garrisons, even before elections were called, the PNP would be leading by at least 14 seats. Be honest, we all know how they twist and use propaganda to try and tell you that a bird is a pig. And some people believe, some really don't. They are just what you call comrades. So it's to their the lies to their advantage. And some of them are linked to can just sit around and collect money with a paper signed with a paper they signed that says they did work. Since Michael Manley, though, there has been no leader as corrupt, deceitful, and treasonous as PJ Patterson, who operates more like our enemy than a political leader. Then he comes to you speaking soft and playing like he is decent. There has never been anyone as corrupt. There is no greater traitor to a nation or a race than Percival James Patterson, and I will leave you with that. Now, he has his rice puppets trying to finish his work, and we won't allow it to happen this time. So Resist these serpents, Jamaica. Think on these things, my people. Peace out.